You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report, episode number 226.2. The Indianapolis Stars' Kyle Neddenriep breaks down the 2025 Indiana All-Star roster.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengelt.
Welcome, basketball fans, to the Central Indiana Sports Report. Today is April 5th, 2025. It's a Saturday, so it's another day for the Central Indiana Sports Report. I'm your host, Greg Mengelt, and I love Central Indiana basketball. Coming to you today from headquarters in Jeffersonville, home of the state champion Red Devils. Producer Susie is right here by my side. Coming up, Kyle Neddenriep of the Indianapolis Star is going to talk about the 2025 Indiana All-Star roster and a little bit about the process and some of the players left off the team. But first, I'm going to ask you to please go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our page. Just search Central Indiana Sports Report. It's easy to find. And also want to let you know about our daily report every weekday at 1 p.m. In our Sports Center style daily show, we talk about high school, college, and professional sports news in Central Indiana and some national sports news, anything the Central Indiana fans will be talking about. Again, 1 p.m. every weekday. The weekends are a little less consistent. Also, later Saturday, we have Will Rutherford's 5 Questions That Need Answers. And Sunday, the Pacers Report with Mike Rich. Before we get to Kyle Neddenriep, let me tell you who is on the 2025 Indiana All-Star team. Fort Wayne's Chase Barnes, who's heading to the University of Indianapolis. Crispus Attucks' Desmond Briscoe, who had committed to Iowa, but changed his mind after Fran McCaffrey left Iowa. So his recruiting is open. Jeffersonville's Michael Cooper, who's headed to Wright State. Of course, he helped lead the Red Devils to the state championship. New Palestine's Julius Geezy, just a scoring machine heading to Indiana Wesleyan. Fisher's Justin Kirby on the top-ranked Tigers team. He's headed to Miami of Ohio. Cathedral's Brady Kohler, who will be going to Notre Dame next season. Of course, Greenfield Central Braylon Mullins, who was a McDonald's All-American, is headed to UConn and almost certainly is going to be Mr. Basketball. East Chicago Central's Dominique Murphy, who has not committed yet. Fort Wayne Blackhawks' Kellen Pickett, who will also be continuing his basketball career at Wright State. Lawrence North's Xavier Robinson, who is going to be playing at Butler. He, of course, was the Marion County Player of the Year. Jeffersonville's Trey Singleton, the hero of the state championship game, who will be playing next season at Northwestern. And Ben Davis's Mark Zachary. He will be playing football at Notre Dame. Here's my conversation with the Indianapolis Stars, Kyle Neddenriep.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengelt.
Kyle, welcome back to the Central Indiana Sports Report. Of course, the Indianapolis Star has named its Indiana All-Star team that will represent the state against Kentucky coming up early June. And most years, I think you probably have 2 or 3 tough decisions. I think this year you probably had 5, 6 really tough decisions on your hands.
Yeah, and just to talk about the process, I mean, we are the naming rights sponsor. I don't pick the team. It's Mike Broughton, the Indian All-Star director, and basically he travels around watching players play, has a list of players, kind of whittles it down, and then they'll go to the top 60 workout, and he's picked the coaches by then. And this year, Mark Urban is the coach from Chesterton. They'll kind of sit down, and Mike may have however X number of players already sort of locked in. and
Sure.
then the coaching staff will kind of decide from there whether the top 60. It's not a tryout. People kind of talk about it like that. So I just want to be as forthright as the whole process works and everything, and then they'll pick the team from there. They send the team to us because we're the naming sponsor and have been since I think 1940 or 39, whenever the first team was named, and so it's so that's kind of how that works. I would,
Wait a second.
but
So you don't have any input in this?
no, no. I
What?
mean, Mike may ask me,
I
my
assume
thoughts
you were
on them.
picking the teams because
Yeah.
you see
Well,
everybody.
according to social media, that's how it works. But no, I'm just and not every I'm overstating that, but it's just
Right.
he may ask me a player or my opinion on somebody, and I'll tell him. But I don't see everybody either.
That's a
I
good
see a
point.
lot of them. I see a lot of them, but I may not see everybody either. So, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of how all that works. And, I think it was a tough year because, this class was really good. I mean, it was,
Definitely
compared to
deep.
last year. Yeah, very deep. Last year's class was not, to be real frank about it. And, this group was deep, way, way, way deeper than that class. So it did make for some tougher cuts. But I think it's also important to remember you can't just look at one player and say, this is what he did. He belongs on the team, and we can get into this more on who wasn't selected and whatever. But it's you're trying to also play two games, and Kentucky's class is really good too this year. So they're, I know they're concerned. They don't want to split with them. They want to sweep them, and that's important too to think about. You're putting a team together to play two games, not just pick the 13 best players,
Well, that was my
quote
next
unquote.
question. That was my next question. How much of it is earning a spot, and how much of it is what the team needs?
Well, that's the hard thing. It's because there's not a strict like, you won state, you did this or that, you're on the team. That's just not, there's so I think by it being more gray, that creates, some hard feelings or, what else could he do? And in the case of Chase Konieczny from South Bend St. Joe this year, there's probably nothing else he could have. I mean, he broke the school record in points. He won state. He went to state last year. But they felt like there were some better players at his position or better fits that and they're not comparing him to 12 other players. They're probably comparing him to maybe two or three. And he may have been a case where it's down to the coaching staff to make that final decision, and they've got two or three guys they're looking at and they went a different direction. Now, would I have put him on the team? Absolutely. I feel like, and when I did my list of players I thought had a good case, I mean, he was number one by far on my list. So that's the hard thing. It's like it's a combination of things. It's winning, it's putting up good numbers. It's also how you fit onto this specific team. You're not going to take 6 point guards, for
Hmm.
instance. And some years are more guard heavy, and this one's really not. It's a pretty good size. You have a lot of players with good size on this team, but yeah, sometimes you run into that glut of who what positions you're taking. Do you have too many wings? You rarely have too many bigs, but you just can't base it off of taking so many guys at one position. But yeah, it's a combination of things, and that's not a great answer, I know, but that's true.
A couple of the other names. Maybe it's just me, but I thought JonAthony Hall would be a lock, and then of course Gavin Betten would be another name that the people in Manchester have to be a little disappointed.
Yeah, so in Hall's case, I think he would have been on the team. And from talking to some people about it, it was sort of a situation where he was supposed to, he's going to be on the track. He really good at the long jump, so
Hmm.
he's going to be on the track team, and there's a conflict on the Friday, so
Okay.
this is a little bit of a behind the scenes type of thing that happened. And he was still probably going to be on the team, but they really wanted him to be, and he wanted to be. But then they also have graduation on Wednesday. There was some talk he might miss that game too, and they're just kind of like, well, that's probably, we need to move forward and select our team, and so that's sort of
Well,
a
that
case
makes
where,
sense.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of a case where he would have been, and maybe you could find you could again argue that and say, well, maybe he could have been on the team, just not, play, or, but they
Hmm.
wanted 12 players who were going to play and were locked into playing in the games, which I totally get. And also too, before I forget, I mean, this has been normally a 13 player team in recent years, and they went to 12 because, partly because it's just hard to play 13 players. And, there's some things last year where, it's like players weren't getting in, and then that creates like, you know, we need, maybe people saying like, well, we should be guaranteed a certain amount of playing time. That team wasn't equipped to handle, putting a lot of bench players on the floor together,
Hmm.
to be honest. So
Yeah.
they were, that's the reality of the situation. So they decided to go to 12, which that's what it used to be. Honestly, it used to be 10 way back in the day, but 12 has kind of been the more common. And I think that's probably what they're going to keep it at, just because of that reason, moving forward. And honestly, it's hard to get 12 players, real good playing time, but it's certainly easier than 13. So that's kind of the reason they did that as well. Sorry, you mentioned Gavin Betten too, and
Oh, sorry.
he was definitely another one. And I forgot to, once you mentioned it, forgot to mention him. But I agree. I think he was another one who, and honestly, like last year, he's on the team, I think 100%. But he kind of ran into a situation too where a lot of guys his size. But again, I thought what else could he do? I mean, he scored
Yeah.
2,000 plus points. He won state. He's sort of the same. There wasn't as much furor online for him as there was Konieczny, but I honestly thought he, probably should have had even as good a case as Konieczny. So, but yeah, anyway, he was another one, besides Hall, and I know we talked about Hall and Konieczny, but he definitely had a spot too.
All right, so let's talk about who did make the team, and I think it starts with Braylon Mullins and Trey Singleton, the two names who stand out to me after this season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think those, we don't have the all-star votes or the finalists yet, I'm sorry, the Mr. Basketball stuff yet, but yeah, those two I think will be at the head of the line when you start talking about that. And you know, certainly Mullins had a season that, if you look
Ooh.
in the history of basketball, high school basketball was up there with just about anybody, other than, making a tournament run, which they had long hope for there at Greenfield Central. And I covered the game that they lost in the sectional final. It was a heartbreaker. They led basically the whole game. They were up by pretty significant amount. Mount Vernon just kept battling back and eventually got it to overtime, won in double overtime. But regardless, he had a great career season. McDonald's All American, all of these accolades. So, but yeah, yeah,
All
and then
earned.
yeah, just very good player, one of the best I've covered. And then Singleton also kind of put himself, and if I think if he hadn't missed those 10 games early,
Exactly.
we'd really be having a great race here. And I think maybe we still will. I don't know. I can't be positive, but I think it would have been better, even than it was. And if they win state, man, I mean, like they ended up doing, and he has that full season, you could make a really strong argument for Trey Singleton. But yeah, I mean, he's unlike any player on this roster. He can handle the ball. He can defend. He defended Luke Ertl. Basically picked him up full court in the semi-state, which was not the whole game, but he did that probably about the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game, and was very impressive doing that. So, but I think he has more game than people realized, and he was a huge factor for that Jeff team to win their first state title since '93. So, but yeah, he's a special player and a really hard worker, and and all of the
Right.
all of the intangible things that make a great player.
Also, a big part of that was Michael Cooper, who's headed to Wright State.
Yeah, and I would have had him. I probably would have had him pretty high on my list too. Of if I was putting together my all-star team, I'd probably have him fifth or sixth on that. I really think highly
Yeah.
of him. He never gets sped up. He handles the ball a lot, and he can also shoots for his career. I think he's like 41% from three. So shoots it at a high rate, even though he handles the ball a ton, so you don't see that combination all the time. So, but yeah, another guy who special talent. I was hoping he would make the team because I thought he earned it, and he might have been in easier than I thought. But yeah, I thought he was definitely deserving.
And a lot of Indianapolis area players that you are familiar with. Of course, Xavier Robinson headed to Butler was an obvious one to make this team.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. He's two-time Marion County Player of the Year. Broke the all-time scoring record at LN over a guy named Greg Oden. So, pretty impressive that he accomplished that. And
Really impressive.
yeah, then he took his team to, they went. I think, when you look at this season, I think last year felt like a little bit of a letdown when they lost to Jeffersonville. They lost that lead late in the game and
Right.
ended up, I think, at least one step short of where we thought they could get to. This year, I felt, even though they lost to Jeff, it was the night game at Newcastle. Honestly, I felt like Jeff was a little bit better team than Ellen was this year, and that's not because of Robinson, but and he played well in that game, but Jeff just a little bit more veteran, probably. If Ellen basically played one senior and that was Robinson, next year I think Ellen will be even better. Even though Robinson won't be there, they'll just be a year older. So, I just, I thought he overall had a really good year. They had a kind of a slip up there in the middle of the season. They got knocked out of the Marion County tournament in the quarterfinal and didn't go as far as I think they thought they should have. But by the end of the year, they were playing pretty well, and largely to do with Robinson just being he wasn't trying to overdo it or score 30, 40 points a game. He's just playing like he needs to play at Butler, and I thought he kind of matured as a player. He's a very mature kid and always has been. But just on the court, I thought he just learned how to play a little bit more, and I think that he was a no doubt all-star for sure.
And not a lot of these all stars are going to Division I Indiana schools, and good to see him headed to Butler.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's going to be a good fit for him. He's kind of a quiet kid, really, but a very high academic. Does a great job with you know those sorts of things off the floor, and I think I think he'll do well there.
And we talked about JonAthony Hall, but not being there. But Justin Kirby is, of course, headed to Miami of Ohio. One of the top players. Well, I mean, a really balanced team that's probably every single guy in that lineup at some point is going to be an Indiana All-Star,
Yeah.
except for JonAthony, who would have been.
Right. Yeah, he probably would have been, and I think Kirby would have made it regardless. I don't know that for sure, but I think Kirby's a guy when you look at player development and look at what Fishers did from that standpoint. He's a prime example because he always, and I've been watching him play since he was pretty young, and Kirby was a guy who's like he always looked the part, but he needed to improve a lot on ball skills, dribbling, shooting, and then by the end of his career, I mean, he was like I think he shot 40, high 40s from the 3-point line, which I would never have thought he would be that type of 3-point shooter. He was like 60 something percent overall from the field. Just he put the work in to make himself, just a lot better skilled player. And then his athleticism is just insane. He's off the charts on that aspect. And he probably, I think he averaged about point something last year, points per game, and he upped that significantly this year. So he was a big part of why this team was so much better, from a regular season standpoint than last year. His development was huge to that, and again, another kid. I think the best is ahead of him. His ceiling is really high, so he could be for Miami of Ohio and potentially at a higher level in the next 4 years.
And of course, Desmond Briscoe, the City Player of the Year, was headed to Iowa. Obvious Indiana All-Star. Was headed to Iowa. Now his recruiting is open. But talk a little bit about Desmond carrying on that great tradition of Christmas Attic stars.
Yeah, 4 year player. He kind of burst on the scene a little bit when he was an underclassman, and went head to head with Xavier Booker at Cathedral, who just transferred from Michigan State to UCLA, but he kind of took Booker to school a little bit in the city championship game, and it was like, wow, that this kid's really good, and ended up being the City Player of the Year as a sophomore and junior. And then he missed a pretty good chunk, kind of similar to Singleton, where he missed about 10 games early in the year and then came back. He had a high ankle sprain that kept him out. He started the year, played really well the first couple of games, and then got hurt. So he missed a pretty good amount as well. But I think he was a guy that, if he could come back and play and play well, which he did, was going to be on the team. 6'8" or 9, good shot blocker, also can do some other things, can handle the ball some when need be, can shoot a little bit, gets the free throw line a lot, won a lot, won a couple city championships. I know they were hoping to win a state championship this year. They got pretty close to that, but yeah, just overall really good career. I think he ended up 4th on the all-time scoring list at Addicts, which is saying something.
Yes, it is.
And I think he almost had 1,000 rebounds too, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, pretty obvious pick. I thought he was pretty high on my list as well.
And I think Brady Kohler probably would have been too. I don't know if he'd be that high on the list, but definitely I think a no-brainer on this team.
Yeah, going to Notre Dame. Another guy, they ran into Addicts in the sectional semifinal, and that was sort of, you kind of wondered if that might decide. Probably not the state championship, because you knew South Bend St. Joe was hanging out there on the north side of the bracket, and they were very, very good as well, ranked number 1 a lot of the year. But I think on the south side of the bracket, that might have been the deciding game to a large degree. And Addicts came back and beat Cathedral. And Kaler, I know he was a little bit hobbled by an ankle there towards the end of the year, missed like 2 or 3 games. But yeah, he's a guy from a talent standpoint. He can shoot it from 3, lefty. A guy who kind of really fits the mold of the current state of basketball at the college level. A guy who can face up and shoot, and also pretty athletic, can get to the basket and those sorts of things. So, his overall numbers might not be as impressive as some, but I know the All-Star coaches really liked him, and I think, yeah, he was a guy you were probably going to take, as long as everything else fit together.
And the other guy heading to Notre Dame was Mr. Football, Mark Zachary. And I got to be honest, that's the one that was not on my radar at all when I was thinking about the Indiana All-Star team.
Well, yeah, that's
I know
one
how good he is, but
right. Same. I would say probably for me too. And because I wasn't sure how that would be handled. There is some precedence for this, and I'll probably end up writing about that at some point. But this isn't a first time situation, even though he only played, right at the end of the season. His resume, from a career standpoint, holds up pretty well. It's actually pretty similar to like a Konieczny or some of these other guys who were actually on the team, because he did win a state title as a sophomore. He was a runner-up in 4A as a junior, so I guess similar to the Fishers guys as well. But from that aspect. But yeah, he especially his junior year, I felt like he really kind of commanded that point guard role. He is super quick, and if you just go roll the ball and say let's play pickup with these guys, he'll be as good as anybody. He's
Yeah.
so that's the thing with him. Like and I think once he gets, he had this thumb thing that kind of just kept him out for a long time, and he had a big thing on it, and he couldn't quite get cleared when he thought he was going to towards the end of the season. And, it was kind of like, we're kind of just waiting because he did start suiting up there at the end of the year, but then he just couldn't quite get cleared. So, he just didn't play up until the very end. But, so I guess that was also the surprise for me. I heard towards the end there that he was going to be considered, and if he showed up to the top 60 and did well, then I know he did do well, so I think that probably clinched it for him. And they, and again, you look at the roster and you need some guards, and he was a guy that I think they felt like they could put the ball in his hands at point guard, and he's also going to go out and defend the other team's best guard. So he wasn't a statistical pick because he didn't really have any this year, but he, from a career and just like, this is a guy we need in our top 12. He made the cut. I know some people argue against that. I heard from some of those people, and I get it. But again, there's not necessarily a rule that that you have to play a certain amount of games or whatever either. So yeah, but that was one that did surprise me a bit, not because of who Mark Decker is, but just because he just didn't play a ton.
We should point out that Mike Broughton does know what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, he's won quite a bit. So
yeah. And then, of course, the scoring machine from new pal Julius Geezy is average 25 points a game, and Indiana Wesleyan's going to love having him. Another no-brainer on the All-Star team.
Yeah, put together 2 years that were really outstanding. He's an interesting story too, because his sophomore year from his junior year, he just looked, he lost about, I want to say 35, 40 pounds. I wrote about that at some point, but the dynamics of the way he looked from one year to the next was amazing. And he really put the work in. He decided, hey, I don't want to be just a guy who stands on the 3-point line, and I need to be more than that. And it was just a total transformation. Changed his diet, changed his habits, and he just got to work, and it paid off for him. He was fantastic as a junior, and then again as a senior. His senior year, they were loaded with this team that had won 2 4A sectional titles. They beat Mullins and Greenfield last year in the sectional, and came back in 3A this year, and were really dominant. They beat LN, they beat a lot of good teams, and then kind of ran into addicts that they didn't match up great with, partly because of Briscoe. But yeah, probably went to that semi-state final, which is pretty pretty outstanding. I knew they wanted another couple wins there, but overall, yeah, I mean, he won a ton, took that program to another level. We all know New Pals football, dominance that they've had, but really they put basketball more on the map than they ever have been. So it's a pretty outstanding career for Julius Gizzy.
And he's made the All-Star team, but and I guess now he's probably on his family's All-Star team, because he that's a lot. It's a long list of great players.
Yeah, man, and also it's cool he's played with his cousin Moses Haynes, who
That's right.
he was a point guard for them. That was another cool, even beyond his sister and brother and mom. He got a chance to play with his cousin. And Noah Haynes was, of course, a really good player in high school and college as well. Moses's dad. So, yeah, really cool family history there, and yeah, I mean that's another element that those two, they're basically like brothers, playing together for all this time, and that's I know meant a lot to them and the families as well.
And Kellen Pickett from Blackhawk Christian is headed to Wright State. Dominique Murphy, East Chicago Central Open recruit after averaging 23 points a game this past season. He's put together a nice career. And the other one that I was not real sure on is Chase Barnes from Fort Wayne, Wayne. He did average 16 points a game. Was not on my radar, but those are the other three from not quite in the area.
Barnes was again, you're comparing him probably when you're analyzing this to other guards. I knew that, I'd actually talked to Broughton. I knew Broughton had liked him, had watched him play a couple times, and they didn't quite go as far as they had the last couple of years. So I wasn't sure like how much that would, factor in. They got beat in the sectional after making
Right.
but he was on teams too that did play in the semi-state the last couple of years, and he'd been a big part of that. But yeah, he's going to UIndy to play for Scott Hetty. So if Hetty likes him, he's another guy who knows quite a bit about
Yes.
basketball.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's one that, yeah, I kind of agree there. I would say I don't know who I would have had necessarily, at that guard spot ahead of him, but you could go down the list and probably look and see. But Barnes is a guy that, I've seen him play a few times. I think he's definitely a talented player who will fit in well with this group, and will probably handle the ball quite a bit and do a good job doing that. But yeah, he was on my radar. I didn't know if he would make it. And then, Pickett, I think well, again, like he's kind of like Brady Kaler a little bit in his game. He can handle the ball some. He can definitely shoot it. And when I saw him play against Avon, and he was really dominant for a good chunk of that game. So plays against good competition at Blackhawk Christian. There they play obviously a lot of 4A teams in Fort Wayne, and they've won a ton of games in his career. And then and Murphy was probably the one too that I wasn't sure how that would, you know, and I would say if you're looking at Konieczny, and it may have came down to Murphy Konieczny, and they decided to go with Murphy, and again, Murphy had great numbers that stack up well, overall, but I didn't know, what you're looking for, a little more physical rebounder maybe with Murphy. That might be something you look at, and he's also put up great career numbers as well. So past Detuan Moore, in
Yes.
scoring up there. So
Bet.
another big name. So yeah, I mean, I've seen him play a few times. He came down here this year and played in December at Brownsburg. I saw him play there. I've seen him play in the Futures game last year. So definitely aware of him. But I didn't know. I thought he might be one. So a lot of these guys, like, if you really start parsing it up, I mean, there's probably eight or so guys who didn't make it who could have taken one of these spots, but yeah,
Yeah.
they decided to go with Murphy, and I, again, rightly so. I think he's certainly deserving of it.
Didn't even mention Grady Carpenter from Tipton, who a lot of years is probably an Indiana All-Star. And a lot of guys like that from our area who great players who just this year was a little too deep.
Yeah, I love Grady's unusual in a good way. His style of play and his passing ability is off the charts. And I thought, when I was starting to look at potential all stars during the season, like he was definitely on my list. There's another kid named Cole Henry at South Ripley. I thought
Mm.
might get a look. And some of these, some of the guys kind of fall off the wayside, unfortunately, when you sometimes they do when you're not making a run in the tournament, pretty deep. But those guys did. They were won sectional titles, and it was not like they didn't do that. So, but sometimes it's just it's bad luck. The class is stacked or the class is not stacked, and sometimes you're lucky to get on the team. Or fortunate maybe is a better word, but it's just kind of the nature of what the class looks like, and what the coaches are looking for. And maybe they see you, maybe they're view you in some way, and they see you in a game and you don't play great, and that may be enough to keep you off the list. So it's just it's hard. It's not a black and white type thing. It's definitely more of a gray area for sure.
Well, no doubt about that. I should mention that the Indiana All Stars will play Kentucky on June 6th at Lexington Catholic, and then the home game at the Field House is on the 7th, the next day. A couple of days before that, the Indiana All Stars will play the Junior All Stars at Greenfield Central in a boys girls doubleheader. It's a good junior team, too, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And you can the core six and the six and the first six. I think it's the first six or one of the six. They play in the Kentucky junior game,
Mm-hmm.
which I want to say is at Charlestown. I
Ooh,
think so.
great gym.
I think yeah, very cool gym, and it's down. I think that's the Sunday before the week kind of gets started, or that's the start of the week anyway. So. But yeah, you can find all that. It is a good junior class. I don't know if it's quite as overall as strong as this one, but we'll see. I mean, that's kind of the fun of finding out. As we work into next year. But yeah, I think the juniors will give them a good battle. There's some good talent on that team, and we'll always see how far these guys go. Some of them may go to prep school next year for all we know, so that's
That's
always
true.
something to kind of keep on your radar as well. But
Yeah,
because we did lose a couple from this class
no
who went
doubt
to prep
about
school.
it. Two of the three best, probably.
Yeah, I got a chance to see Sicily play on Wednesday at the Chipotle Nationals. We're here actually, so saw his Darren DeVries was there to watch him, and wrote a little story about him. But he said he would have done it 10 times over if he had the chance, and he thought it worked out well for him. And from a selfish perspective, I love when the kids stay, but I get it. I mean, it's a different world now, and we're going to lose our share. But I guess that gives chances for maybe two kids who wouldn't have made this team to make it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kyle. Appreciate your time as always.
You bet. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Thanks so much once again to Kyle for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report. Always love having him on the show. If you are interested in seeing the Central Indiana Sports Report continue to grow and thrive, please share these segments with your friends and family. We humbly thank you in advance. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media. And I love Susie. That's exactly why.